"You don't deserve princess treatment." That was the last thing he said before he picked up his wine glass, smiled like nothing had happened, and returned to his risotto. Sienna sat frozen, not from shock. No, she'd seen the signs, but hearing it out loud, so calmly, so casually, carved something deep. They had been dating for a year and a half, long enough for her to believe this man, Alec Hargrove, would be her last first love. They had met at an art gallery. She was working part-time there while finishing her master's in design. He walked in wearing a navy wool coat, spoke about light and texture like he actually cared, and lingered. By the third date, she was hooked. But she never noticed that every compliment came with a condition. "You look beautiful tonight. Finally decided to put effort in, huh?" Or that every gift came with a debt. Now, here they were, at an overpriced restaurant Alec had chosen, where he ordered for her without asking, and dropped that sentence like a knife. "Why would you say that?" she whispered finally, her throat tight. He didn't look up. "Because you expect things you haven't earned. A woman earns princess treatment by being obedient, sweet, and grateful, not by being whatever this new version of you is." Her hands trembled under the tablecloth, not because she was scared, because she was done. But what she didn't know was that this dinner was about to unlock a series of events far beyond her relationship, starting with the man at the next table who had been listening. If you find value in real stories told with clarity and truth, make sure to subscribe to Stay Informed with iStory. He heard every word. The stranger at the next table had noticed Sienna the moment she walked in, not because she was the most glamorous woman in the room, but because of the way she carried herself, like someone trying to hold together a version of herself she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. And when Alec said those words, he paused his wine mid-air. He'd heard men like Alec before, men who dressed their cruelty in cashmere, men who could gaslight with charm and wound without raising their voices. He didn't interfere. Not yet. But he made a quiet decision, one that would change Sienna's life. Because he knew Alec, not personally, but professionally. On Monday morning, Alec Hargrove was scheduled to present a major acquisition pitch to the board of Lorne and Chase Ventures. And the man at the next table? He was the youngest senior partner at that firm, Dominic Chase. Sienna stepped out into the cold, the night wind kissing her cheeks as if to remind her she was still real, still whole, still hers. She didn't say goodbye to Alec, just walked away. No drama, no tears, only a clean, controlled exit. But inside, something was breaking. She walked until her feet hurt, then sat on a bench overlooking the city park's frozen lake. She thought about all the times she made herself small to fit inside someone else's frame, how many dinner tables she swallowed words at, how many times she mistook crumbs for love. And for the first time in months, she didn't reach for her phone. No venting texts to best friends, no doom scrolling, just silence. But silence that night was loud. 2 days later, Sienna got a call from an unknown number. "Miss Langford? This is Kira from Lorne and Chase Ventures. We're putting together a creative kennel for a new design partnership. Are you available for a short meeting this Thursday?" Sienna blinked. She'd never even heard of them directly contacting freelancers. But she said yes. What she didn't know was this wasn't about design. Not really. It was about power. And Dominic Chase was about to return her dignity in the most unexpected way. Sienna dressed simply, a soft cream blouse, charcoal trousers, minimal makeup, enough to look professional but not to impress. She told herself it was just another pitch, just another meeting.
But when she walked into the sleek, glass-paneled office at Lorne & Chase Ventures and saw the man with the silver cufflinks, her breath caught. It was him. He stood when she entered, extended his hand. "Miss Langford, I'm Dominic Chase. Thank you for coming on such short notice." His voice was calm, low, no trace of flirtation, only purpose. They spoke for 20 minutes, or rather she did, about her design process, her thesis work, her idea of visual storytelling. He listened, not nodded politely, listened. And then, as the meeting drew to a close, he said something that made her blink. "I believe design is about truth, the way we present ourselves, our values, our boundaries. I saw yours the other night." She froze. "You were at the restaurant?" He nodded once. "I was. I also know Aled Hargrove is scheduled to present to us on Monday, but after what I witnessed, he will no longer be invited into this building." Sienna's breath hitched. You can do that?" "We protect who we partner with. Character matters." She didn't know what to say. Gratitude felt too small. Rage felt too late. But what she felt most was seen. Dominic stood. "We'd still love to work with you on something real. A campaign about women reclaiming narrative in design. You'd lead the direction." Sienna stared at him, not because of the offer, but because this moment was the opposite of everything Alec had told her she didn't deserve. And suddenly, she wasn't shaking anymore. She smiled. "I accept." But outside that boardroom, someone was watching. He sat 2 cars back, engine running, tinted windows rolled just enough to see her walk out of the office building. He didn't smile, didn't flinch, just watched. Alec Hargrove had a way of finding things out. He always had. Control wasn't something he gave up easily, especially not to a woman he had spent months conditioning like a perfectly curated resume, presentable, predictable, pliable.
And yet, there she was, radiant, confident, smiling, with Dominic Chase. Alec tightened his grip on the steering wheel. It wasn't just about her leaving him. It was about her being wanted. After. He picked up his phone, opened a private folder, and stared at a draft email he'd written the night she walked away. Subject: Internal conflict of interest, Lorne and Chase. He hovered over the send button. He could ruin them both. A carefully crafted lie. A picture taken out of context. Enough to trigger an investigation. But he didn't send it. Not yet. Because some victories taste better when served cold. Sienna was still adjusting to the pace of change. Within days, she'd gone from anonymous freelancer to creative director of a campaign that would soon land in national media. Her ideas were on whiteboards, her sketches on screens, and for once, her voice in the room mattered. Dominic wasn't hovering or micromanaging. He gave her space, autonomy, but she wasn't naive enough to think his support came without attention. He was watching, not like Alec, who tracked to control, but like someone waiting to see if she would believe in herself. And slowly, she was. That Monday, Alec's scheduled pitch meeting came and went. A junior assistant crossed his name off the printed schedule without fanfare. No one questioned it. Dominic's authority made it unnecessary. But behind closed doors, HR received an anonymous email. The subject line was the same Alec had drafted: Internal conflict of interest, Lorne and Chase. It contained screenshots, one grainy photo from outside the office, an image of Sienna smiling, a vague accusation of favoritism. HR flagged it, but Dominic had anticipated it. He brought them receipts, time-stamped correspondence, a full paper trail, Sienna's interview call initiated by a junior assistant before Dominic even knew her name. He had never once broken protocol.
So instead of a scandal, Alec's attempt bounced back like a rubber bullet. But someone tipped off Sienna. An envelope arrived at her apartment. No return address. Inside was a printout of the email. She read it 3 times, felt the familiar twist of humiliation crawl up her neck. Was this who Alec had always been? She called no one. But she did show up at Dominic's office the next morning. She placed the printout on his desk. He didn't flinch. He said, "I know. It's handled. We're safe." She sat down. "That's not why I'm here." He looked up. "I need to tell my story. Not just through design, through voice, through words. I've spent years being edited by men like him. I want the next woman to see it coming." Dominic leaned forward. "Then let's give her a platform." Sienna breathed in, and for the first time, the air didn't burn. The invitation came 2 weeks later. A national design and culture symposium hosted by one of the biggest networks in the country. They'd heard about the campaign Sienna was leading, but more importantly, they'd read her op-ed. Yes, she had written it. A piece titled "The Cost of Shrinking: How Women Get Edited Out of Their Own Lives." It went live on a Thursday. By Friday, it had been shared 40,000 times. Messages poured in, from women, from interns who'd walked away from toxic mentors, from mothers who finally saw what had been done to their daughters, from strangers who said, "I didn't have words until you gave me yours." Dominic gave her the option to opt out of the public attention. He said, "You don't owe anyone your pain," but she shook her head. She said, "This isn't about pain, it's about reclamation." The day of the event arrived. The auditorium was modern, packed. Cameras, lights, polished hosts. Sienna stood backstage, holding her notes, but she didn't plan to use them. She wasn't here to present a pitch. She was here to tell the truth. When she called her name, she stepped into the light. The microphone felt colder than she expected, the stage warmer. "I was once told I didn't deserve princess treatment," she began. A murmur swept through the crowd. But what he really meant was, "I don't want you to know your worth, because once you do, I lose control." She paused, and then, without looking at her notes, she told the story of Alec, of the dinner, of the silence that followed. But she also told the story of her own return, the woman she rebuilt, the voice she stopped diluting. The room was quiet when she finished, not the silence of discomfort, but of reverence. And then they stood. The applause roared through her chest like a rebirth. But in the back row, one man did not clap. Alec. Because this wasn't just a talk, it was a reckoning. Sienna didn't notice the reporter at first. She was still riding the high of the symposium. People were stopping her on the street, reposting her speech, quoting her lines with reverence, but the media attention was inevitable, and so was the ambush. One morning, as she stepped into the co-working studio, a young woman approached with a mic and cameraman trailing behind. "Miss Langford, do you think Dominic Chase only hired you because of what you went through with Alec Hargrove?" The question cut through the morning chill like a blade. Sienna blinked. "Excuse me?" The reporter didn't flinch. "There are rumors your appointment to the design lead was emotional, not professional, that Chase used your story as PR."
Her hands froze on the strap of her bag. For a second, the old fear surfaced, that maybe this was all too fast, that maybe Alec's words were still shaping the air she breathed. But then she saw the young intern behind the camera, barely 20, watching her. Sienna turned back to the reporter. "Would you ask that if I were a man? If a male creative director gave a brilliant speech after surviving betrayal, would you reduce him to pity? Or would you call him brave?" The reporter opened her mouth, Sienna cut her off. I earned this. Not because of what happened to me, but because of what I built in spite of it. She walked away. Later that evening, Dominic texted her a link. Sienna Langford shuts down sexist question on live feed and does it with grace. It had gone viral again. He followed it with a single message. You don't owe anyone your survival story, but when you choose to share it, it changes people. And she realized this was no longer about Alec. It was about every woman watching. Alec requested a meeting. He didn't email, he didn't text. He sent a letter. A real one, handwritten, delivered to her apartment by courier. Sienna opened it cautiously. We need to speak, just once. No press, no games, just clarity. She sat with it for 3 days. Then she agreed. They met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in the older part of the city, the kind where time moved slowly and egos didn't fit. Alec was already there when she arrived. No smile, no performance, just a man in an over-ironed shirt who looked smaller than she remembered. She sat down, spine straight. He began. I've been thinking about what I said that night and after. She said nothing. I was angry, but mostly humiliated. You left. You walked away from someone who thought he had all the control. Still, she didn't speak. I wanted to hurt you. With words. With that email. I know you know about it. I'm not proud of it. Sienna tilted her head slightly. Then why did you ask to meet? Alec hesitated. Because I thought you'd need closure. That was when she finally spoke. No, Alec. You need closure. I already have mine. The moment I walked away, I took it with me. His face faltered. She continued, voice steady. You don't get to rewrite the ending. This isn't your narrative anymore. He nodded slowly, but as she stood to leave, he said one last thing. Just tell me one thing. Do you love him? She paused. Not because she didn't know, but because she did. I love who I am around him. That's all that matters. She walked away without looking back. Outside, the sky had turned gold, a soft, affirming kind of light. She took a deep breath. One part left. 3 months passed. The campaign launched nationwide. Billboards, digital installations, a traveling exhibit that featured women artists and designers rewriting narratives that once silenced them. And at the center of it all, Sienna Langford. She became a face people associated with resilience, not because she endured, but because she rebuilt. Dominic stayed close, but never intrusive. Their connection deepened like music, layered slowly. Trust, timing, silence, then harmony. One evening, as the exhibit wrapped in Chicago, Sienna stood alone in the main gallery. The lights dimmed. Only one installation glowed. Her piece. It was a mirror, fractured, but stitched with gold. Inspired by Kintsugi. It bore the title, I Stayed Broken Long Enough for You to Think I Belonged That Way. She didn't hear Dominic approach. He stood beside her, holding something small in his hand. I've been thinking, he said, about how men are taught to propose power, not partnership. She turned. He wasn't on one knee, he didn't hold a ring. Instead, he opened his palm, a vintage key, to the new design space, Our next chapter, yours to lead, mine to build beside you. She laughed softly, a full, open sound, the kind she hadn't heard from herself in years. And then she said yes. Not to a man, not to a ring, but to the version of her life that was finally hers. As they stepped outside, the first snow began to fall. In the distance, a little girl looked at the mirror piece through the glass. She pointed. "Mommy, that one's not broken." "It's shining." Her mother nodded. "Exactly."